Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you might be in the diaspora. This is Omiinka 8 speaking to you from Omi's Organic Broadcaster Live, and this is a special series in our health category. And to all you speaker followers out there, thank you so much for following me. And please do go down and subscribe if you have not already subscribed. Tell someone about our show. Bring someone to the show. Also, give me the 2 thumbs up and support me in the topic. This particular topic is on the allied health profession and on health and wellness. And we're going to be talking about this whole month about heart condition and myopathy condition is real, ladies and gentlemen, and a number of us have never known the real diagnosis for a broken heart. But after today, you'll know thoroughly about a broken heart and how to mend a broken heart. How can we mend a broken heart? And is this a real condition? And why do some doctors tell us it's all in our head and it's not there? And some people have even been driven over to the psychiatric ward, all in the name of the doctor claiming that the person is out of their mind, that they're not going through a heart attack, but it is a mental distress, and they want to enroll this person in a 72-hour hold, excuse me, to hold them there until they get a grip. Now, some of us never get a grip. We continue to give description of our symptoms, like being a myotachyogram, that is a myocardiology condition of a heart that has broken, that is swollen up and broken in many pieces. Now, unfortunately, you got a number of different people now, and the statistics is showing that more and more people are suffering from a broken heart. More and more people. And let's talk about the African American race, who have been delayed when things in their lives have been delayed or been set aside, or abruptly losses have been had in their families, the loss of their children who are being gunned down on the street. This is a sudden loss and causes brokenhearted from a loss of a loved one being removed. The grief that is stricken in these particular individuals is unheard of. So now the statistics are showing there are more and more stress conditions that are coming into the hospital that are headed right over to the psych ward, bypassing the cardiology department and not even looking into this heart that could have actually swollen up and burst into many pieces. And now this heart, the heartache is real and is not being treated. I know this wholeheartedly. I know this. I know many people, and especially some were in my family, who had such a grief-stricken condition that it went into brokenheartedness. It does exist, ladies and gentlemen. And let's speak primarily on the African American families today, because that's what I know best. We have been marching for years and years, asking to be compensated for our loss, our grief-stricken homes that are still suffering from the Mayafa, the Middle Passage, where our fathers and mothers and grandparents went through slavery. It left us without a legacy, financially grieved and stricken from them not leaving a legacy. And not to mention, when the African Americans don't have access to jobs and they are delayed. Their dreams are delayed. They're one of the very first ones to go into depression and stress-led condition from the loss of a loved one to bring about the grief in their life, and then ultimately bring about the myocardiopathia condition, which is better known as brokenheartedness. Yes, it does exist. It's a real diagnosis. I looked it up. And what I came to talk to you about is, how do we solve this grief-stricken communities of the African American who so frequently see and experience this grief in their life? Sometimes it turns into anxiety. For a moment, they take a breath and they're waiting to exhale because they cannot breathe. They truly cannot breathe because that breath is caught up in a moment of grief. And then, not to mention, that heart is so heavy, it literally has some physical damage that's been done to it. And it's not all in your head. Don't mistake this for being all in your head. It is a real condition. That heart becomes heavy and breaks in many pieces, and there is a circulation problem where you are not able to breathe, and your symptoms are just like you're having a heart attack. I know this symptom, and I used to experience this from what I saw around me and the pressures and stress of looking at what was happening in our community. In the Black community, a lot of African Americans are trying to still get out because of the visual picture that's painted for them, causing them to have sudden grief or to have lingering grief for long periods of time, causing clinical depression in their communities, and ultimately causing the myopathy condition called heartbrokenness. And I want you to understand that this is a topic that we're speaking on this month because I want to alert the African American people to the fact that their pain and heartbreak is real. It is not a fallacy and it's not all in your head. So don't just shake it off. Go and get some therapeutic help. Most of this treatment comes from therapeutic counseling to talk you to do the talk of channeling you out of this state of mind to bring you into wholeness. But a number of you don't know how to go and get this psychiatric help. You go into the emergency room and you ask the doctor to check your heart to see if there's any type of arrhythmia problems where your heart is beating off course, or to see if you are suffering a heart attack. And then the results is, I can't find anything. Can you see anything? No, I can't. There is no heart attack. There is no irregular heartbeat. But at the same time, this is one of the symptoms of myocardiopathy, is irregular heartbeat, valves not closing properly in the vessels, whereas the doctor could take a closer look in an electrocardiogram to possibly see the arrhythmias in the beat of the heart, that they're skipping a beat, and that this heart has grown very, very thick and heavy, and it has become so overwhelmed that it has broken into pieces. These are tests that can be ran in a hospital to show that there's a real condition going on here, and not just a person feeling sad, feeling depressed, or having anxiety. Those are the symptoms of a broken heart. No one needs to be placed in a 72-hour hole to be observed for psychiatric disorder or possibly suicide. No one needs to be treated like their psychiatric patient, but a real patient under the cardiomyopathy department under cardiology. So, why have this condition been so suppressed and they have misled many, many individuals, especially African American, telling them to go home. It's all in your head. It is not real. This is not a condition that you should be concerned with. You are not suffering from a heart attack. When in fact, contrary, my friend, many have gone home under the condition of suffering from a heart attack. Many have gone home with this broken heart not being mended or fixed and having to suffer through it, causing more depression in the family with other children looking off at the condition and going into depression themselves. The African American community is laden with depression because the dream that has been deferred for so long, for so many issues, whether it be a job, whether it be a promotion, whether it be an advancement on the job, whether it be enrollment in college, or whether it be a delay in graduating because of lack of money. These are all conditions that are real, that happen in the minority community. It may also be in other brown minority people as well. But today, ladies and gentlemen, we're focusing in on the African American because we always do this thing where we say people of color. Then the African American get lost in the shuffle and their situations never get addressed. And then we end up looking at the LGBT, looking at the Hispanics, looking at the migrants, and everybody else but the African American who are suffering now from a lack of reparation, a lack of making them whole from serious situations of incarceration and using the incarceration as another form of slavery. Now, if the society wanted to come together and make a change and say, we are now going to do everything we can to prepare for reparation, one of the first things they could do would be to release the African American prisoners out of the cells because they've gotten a bad deal. Even with the drug addictions or even with the drug cases, they've gotten a bad deal. That could be the first step into releasing them from prison and giving them real therapeutic treatment, helping them to transition back into their homes while giving them access to therapeutic treatment and compensation financially. Because society, those who make the laws, have really done an injustice to a number of those people who come out after doing time, who cannot find jobs, who are now in a worse shape than they were before they was institutionalized, and then they have children and mouths looking up at them, and they have no way of acquisition, no way of obtaining a job. And then the felonies that are put on them after they've served the time. Take the felonies off if they've truly served the time. And some of them that have been falsely accused, that have been exonerated, especially clear their files and allow them to start fresh so that they can become upright citizens back into the community and not outcasts who are subject to another crime because of being institutionalized. We've got a serious problem of heartbrokenness. A number of African Americans' families are plagued by having loved ones locked up in prison, and they're grieving because it's unnecessarily wrong to actually put someone in prison who have served their time after they've served their time and put them in another prison when they come out. Now they're plagued with the felony on their record. They cannot get employment. They cannot start over again. They cannot begin the process of saying, I want to start fresh with my family, because every odd is still against them. Now, I'm saying for the benefit of the brokenhearted individuals, which we've all have suffered this diagnosis. I know it has been in my family. No matter what your financial status is, no matter what your caste system is, and how well you are laced with all of your degrees, you have had somebody in your family that has gone through brokenheartedness and who have been disenfranchised by the delay of their dreams. African Americans have been waiting so long for so many things to get right that they have not gotten right, and their heart has gotten heavy, and they have suffered from brokenheartedness, whether they know it or not. It is a true condition, and it has a diagnosis and symptoms. But who has offered up a treatment? How can you offer up a treatment, and will finance solve the problem? It will solve the problem if you send the fathers home out of prison. If you release them, it will solve the problem to bring a father back into the household, to make it whole, so that that mother has balance in the household of rearing her children and bringing the finance back to the home. But we keep saying we can't give reparation. Oh, yes, we can. You've taken our men and you build organizations called prison with them, and they're locked in prison doing the bidding of those large companies who are making a mint off of these black men, all to the tune of destroying their consciousness, their reputation, and when they come out, they cannot start over and be rehabilitated because they start their sentence all over again. Well, we've got to put something on the table, and we've got to discuss what is causing this brokenheartedness. And can a brokenhearted be mended? Yes, it can. And let's start the mending process right now, here and now, on this show, where we are featuring tracheomyocardiopathy, better known as a broken heart. How do we mend this broken heart? Well, we start off by readdressing the inappropriate incarcerations and the false indictments of the incarceration that leads to drug cases in prison for holding drugs, carrying drugs, or selling drugs. Those people need to have an opportunity. The ones who now you are legalizing cannabis, and at one time it was a felony. Now those men are still locked up. Now that you've overthrown this cannabis and you see the good in it, why can't you see the good in releasing those men from prison to go home to their wives, to take the stress off of their family and mend the broken heart? Well, I want to say a prayer for the visually blind who cannot see, and for the deaf who cannot hear, and now for the brokenhearted who cannot have hope. My prayer is that the universe will speak out against this injustice. My prayer is that the universe in all four cardinal directions will rise from the north, west, south, east, and raise up a standard that all men will be able to see this injustice of the prison system. And when the individuals are released, they do more time because now they have to wait and hope that their records are expunged, and they have to spend more money to expunge them. Is this a racket or what? We're not helping innocent people that have been exonerated, and we're not surely helping those that are coming out of prison after they did their bid. And when they come out, there should be more hope than what it is. This is causing a large amount of individuals' teeth to be set on edge and their hearts to miss a beat, causing more heartbreak than ever before. We have a society that have not been diagnosed properly and given not only the symptom, but given a treatment plan for mending their broken heart. And when people see their self-worth going down financially, because they've lost their pension, because they lost their Social Security, they've lost their benefits, and because they see that someone has stolen their pension and they have not provided that pension for them, and they've highway robbery taken away all of those legacies that they could leave for their children. Wouldn't anyone be distressed and perplexed and damn near out of their mind from being frustrated because their life has gone nowhere? Well, we can fix that. We can start that today. We can start a committee to talk about how can we mend this brokenheartedness in the African American community, and how can we start to repay them reparation for their shortcomings, because it's going to be worse than what you know when those men and women start coming out of prison and have no jobs to go to, and they have did their bidding, like going in like a good soldier and did their time. We have got to do better than what we're doing, because this brokenheartedness, the statistics are showing that there are a number of the brokenhearted much more than it was 7 or 8 years ago. It has gotten worse, and it's going to wax harder and get worse. And now that we know this is not just something you'll get over or it's all in your mind, now that we know that it is a real diagnosis with symptoms of an identical heart attack, how would you know if a person was having a heart attack or not, if the symptoms are identical to a heart attack? If they describe them that way, you must honor those symptoms and treat them, and not shift them over or slough them off and say it's all in your mind. Too many people are going without treatment, and you are taking a diagnosis and you are desecrating it and disregarding it. There's too many people that have come in the hospital I know of. When I worked in the emergency room, people would come in threatening a heart attack, and the doctor said there's nothing there, because they listen to the heartbeat and they think all of the symptoms are just in someone's head. But not necessarily. If you do those tests, you can see the electrocardiogram will show if their heart is out of balance and if it has become swollen and broken. And all those tests can be taken to truly give a good diagnosis of brokenheartedness. But we've got to talk about this because it's plaguing the African American community. And a number of African Americans are doing everything in their power to stay on the up and up and to keep their encouragement and to not to fall prey of depression. But it is very difficult for mothers who have children taken out of their home because they cannot provide a house for them or a place to lay their head. Now they have become very brokenhearted, and they have lost it. I mean, literally lost it to the point that some of them are seeking sedative and pharmaceutical drugs just to alleviate them from these so-called hurts of a broken heart. We can do something about this. We can make a change, and we can make that change today. And we can address our governmental system to do something in an emergency. This is an emergency situation where you're going to have to go in with therapeutic individuals, spiritual individuals who know how to identify this brokenheartedness, that can actually treat these various different mothers and fathers who are not in the prison, and those who are also in the prison. It is an epidemic now. It is a major epidemic, and people are just calling it depression. All the Black people are becoming depressed. It starts out with a broken heart. It starts out with a delay of a dream. It's not all about someone going wacko out of their mind because they just want to be depressed. It's not something they ask for. It's something that's given to them. And when we look at our penal institution, the pipeway to prison, we see that this has all been orchestrated and set up. And because it's orchestrated and set up, we've got to address the children. so we can detour these children from this pipeline and detour them from special ed. Special ed has been all a fallacy, and it's a way to separate and make unequal within the school building because the child is not getting any more extra help than normal. Mothers are frustrated and upset and stressed out over their children year after year, not making any progress, not advancing back to the mainstream where they can get actually placed back into the mainstream. They are actually getting worse. So mother's burden of their heartbreak is even heavier because now Junior is not going into the mainstream and he is not being challenged in special ed, and he will not graduate with a core 40, but with just a certificate instead. That's enough to break any mother's heart. To the dream that she had for her child graduating with a core 40, going to college, is now vamped out, and his condition will never change. And now mother is having to look at her child from a distance, not being able to get the all-American dream, an education with a diploma. So these are the kind of things that make mothers worry and cry. Then we have the system stepping in to take the children out of the home for fear that the mother cannot provide a sufficient home for them. Instead of going and giving that mother the money to buy a sufficient place, one of these dilapidated houses be refurbished and her put in it. Instead, you take the child 2 to 3 hours away and give them to somebody else that's in another race and give that child up and take that child from that mother, causing her to have more grief and distress and more brokenheartedness. Why are you bringing on the brokenhearted to those family members who are already down on their knees and who are still struggling to get up? Now, we have got to stop this talking about we're helping Black community when we are causing them to fall and causing them to lose their prized possession, their children. We've got to get a handle on this family and child services because they're placing these children in the hands of individuals who don't have any right to raising anybody's child, let alone somebody else's child. They don't have that right, and you're giving them over and paying them a hefty salary. Why not pay that mother that salary if she has no income coming in? Let's switch this thing around. Take that $2,000 to $3,000 that you're giving some other outside middle-aged non-minority the money to raise a child just because she has a good front of presenting a house that appears to be a home, but is not a home. Give that money to that mother and set her up every month to establish herself so she could be a better mother. Put her in child care classes, mandate that she go, and mandate that she has visitations and assessment by other trainees that can help her to be a better mom. Take that money and put it to good use, but don't give it to some other person who don't deserve it and who's now making these children, and they're going into, they're pedophiles, and they're touching the children, and they're doing horrible things to the children, and yet you say that they can do a better job. No, it's always best to try to work with that mother. The mother can do a better job. Now she's heartbroken. She's lost. She's out of her mind. She cannot get herself together because she don't know when her children are coming home. You're making matters worse for the African American. And I know it because I almost got caught up in that system. But just by the grace of God, my sister saw fit to adopt all of her brothers and sisters when my parents were deceased. And a lot of you African Americans are going to have to step up. If these mothers and fathers are becoming deceased, you have to step up as a family member and take over the guardianship of those children. And you have to fight for them because they're going into a system that is deployable. And the mother knows it. And the mother knows even in her weakest hours, she could be a better mom. And we know that mothers can be trained to be better moms. I have trained them myself. And it's very vital that we look at what is bringing on all this heartbreak into the houses of African Americans. We have the system taking things out, destroying the mother and the father because they don't have income and they don't have jobs. Then give them a job. Don't take their children and give them to some foreign individual and then give them the thousands of dollars as if you're rewarding them. To do what? They're miseducating these children. These children don't know their heritage and their culture. And you're paying them to devastate Black children or other minorities and people of color. We've got to talk about it today, people. This is a live feature, and you got your Omi Inca 8 coming at you from Omi's Organic Broadcaster. If you have not become a friend, don't only become a friend. I like for you to become a follower. Go down below and sign up to become a follower and give me the 2 thumbs up because I'm on the money today. And I'm on a roll. And this series about brokenheartedness will be featured throughout this whole month. We must address it. We got cities and states like Boston, where they're documenting that the net worth of the African American is $8. The net worth. I know it to be possible because it's easy for a school teacher to lose her financial status and fall down below the level of a standard of normal income. I know this, but yet we are going to have to come out of retirement and we are going to have to set up institutions and business and corporation, and we are going to have to establish ourselves because the system is not designed to help us. It's designed to crush us to the ground where we are experiencing such brokenheartedness to the point where we can go into the hospital and end up in a psychiatric ward instead of over in the cardiology department to treat this brokenheartedness. I want all of you cardiologists that are listening today. You have tons of patients that are walking around here like zombies that are suffering from myocardiopathy, which is a real diagnosis, and they're not being treated. It's being overlooked. And what happens to a broken heart that's being overlooked? Clinical depression sets in, and it is routine condition where it is going untreated, and you got all these cardiologists who have stress testing rooms where they can test the heartbeat of an individual and they can put them on treatment to help them to get better. I prescribe that all doctors that have African American patients that are suffering from grief or loss, that you do a thorough examination of these individuals to rule out the myocardiopathy condition. And when you find it, make sure you have a treatment plan for them so that they can rehabilitate and their hearts can get better. Because when you're dealing with someone with a broken heart, nothing matters to them in life. It's not because of depression and stress. It's because they have lost all hope. And you got doctors that are misdiagnosing these clients and they're going without treatment and they're walking around like zombies. They need treatment, doctors, and they need help. And the only way they can get help is that you have to do the electrocardiograms and EKGs so you can discover what is really going on with this heart. And don't shove it off as it all being in the mind, because it's not. I had someone to tell my family member that when they said, I feel like I'm suffering a heart attack, they said, it's all in the mind. It's not real. And you're not having a heart attack. And when he said it too many times, they began to think that he was baffled in the mind and that he was suffering from mental illness, when it wasn't, in fact, mental illness, but he had a loss. He had a real loss, a loss of something that he held in his dream ever since he was a schoolboy, and he held that in his dream as being a part of his life. And when it was no longer accessible in his life and he lost access to it, he lost his hope. He lost his vision. He became sick to the point where he couldn't breathe. He was waiting to exhale and couldn't take that breath. And because he couldn't, that heart began to have arrhythmia and began to burst from brokenheartedness. It's a real condition, ladies and gentlemen. And don't let anybody tell you it's not. And then don't let anybody put you over in the ward with the psychiatric ward, because that's what they're going to try to do. And they're going to try to get you held there for 72 hours to re-examine you. And during that 72 hours, they're going to mound you up with medication, making you into a patient, so that they then will begin to treat a psychiatric patient rather than a cardiac arrest, because that's what you're suffering from. And all of these symptoms are just like a heart attack when you suffer from grief and distress, and when you have had a dream delayed. It's very vital that we get a hold of this topic this month. It's very vital that we get this message out to all those African Americans who's ever had a loss and are suffering from grief as we speak right now, that need a rehabilitation through a spiritualist to come in to identify these problems and to help put a lid on them by addressing those symptoms that can be treated. Yes, it can be treated. But some people have such a wear on their heart that it takes its toll on their heart. And eventually they do have a real heart attack. But when someone cannot breathe, cannot be in small places, and they have claustrophobia, and they're experiencing anxiety, these are real symptoms of a heart attack, and they must be treated. If gone untreated, they get worse. And psychotropic medicine does not help them. I've had doctors tell me psychotropic medicine won't work if it's a delay or a grief or anxiety of something that the person has lost, a great loss. These are the areas that can be treated when you address that loss and you discuss it and you replace it with something else. But you cannot let people suffer in distress and tell them that their pain is not real, that it doesn't exist. You cannot. African Americans are becoming astute, and they're learning more about brokenheartedness, and they're understanding about grief. People need grief therapy, especially children need grief therapy to help them through. I was a young child who lost both my mother and father. And had I not had the spiritual grief connection to understand why they made their transition, I would have lost hope too. I would have grieved, and I would have gone through and as a matter of fact, I did have a delayed grief after both of them had expired, and I felt that there was no coming back for my mother and father. So I know what it is to grieve a loved one. I know what it is to grieve a loss. It's very vital that you address these problems with therapeutic and spiritual counseling, not just from a regular general practitioner, but from a spiritualist who can sit down to talk to you about that loss and about death in general. Some of you have never had the opportunity to talk about death. And I was fortunate. A chief spent many, many years with me to talk to me about transitioning and what death meant. I understood that death didn't mean that that person had left me. That meant that that person was in the spirit and I could reach them even more, much better now in their absence of death. And I understood that death wasn't the final answer. And I'm telling you who are out there suffering right now, death is not the final answer. Your ancestors are with you more than they ever have been. They're in the spirit and ready to connect with you. And you must call their names and attach yourself to them, set up an altar to them. Never forget them because they're with you. They're energy and frequency. Energy can never die, nor can it be recreated. And it goes back to its source. So if it hasn't gone back to God yet, it will linger around you. You have to seek it out and call that energy back to you. Your mother is closer to you now than she's ever have been. She's in the spirit. You can tap into her energies. But it's very vital you get this kind of teaching. Everyone doesn't get this type of spiritual teaching. And they see it as being fetish, or they see it as being something that comes from false teaching. No, it's not. It's real. And African American, until you touch into the spirit realm, you forevermore be feeling stress and brokenheartedness. If I will mend your broken heart, and that's why I'm bringing you to this. If I mended my broken heart, because I once had a broken heart too, of feeling delayed in the fact that I was going to meet my father when instead I met a dying man. If I mended my broken heart and told me that I would see my parents here and now on this earth, not just in paradise, but here and now. And I was able to be at rest with the fact that my mother and father had made their transition. I was feeling hopeless and I was feeling lost because I had no mother to connect me back, who I never had a chance to meet. So I understand what grief is. And not only am I doing this show to help me, but to help my family and the loved ones around me who've experienced grief and loss, because we've got to put this back in perspective. And yes, Caucasian, you can do something about this. You can speed up the game because you've taken a lot away from us. You've delayed a lot of conditions for us. You are a significant part and play a part in the repairs and the rehabilitation of the African American. Why say you don't owe us anything when you took everything we had and we built your nation and we took our hard-earned time and created a legacy for you to leave to your children? Then why not look back over the reparation papers and say there is something that we can do to fix their communities? It is something we can do to lighten their load. It is something we can do to bring about encouragement. Don't just keep saying that you can't, you don't see how. Then there is a way out of no way, because people are suffering real heart conditions of brokenheartedness. It is not a fallacy. It is not a make-believe. It is not in their head. It is real. In the inner city, there are people living in situations and states that you never heard of, that none of you Caucasians would be able to exist in. But yet, African Americans are living in those environments on a daily basis. You can do something to lessen the load. And I don't mean just patch it up with money. I mean set up structured program where they can go and get therapeutic counseling from their own kind, from the Babalaws, the priests, Apete Bees, and Nyanafa, and the priestess. Set it up so that you make this a legal type of therapeutic training where they can be reimbursed, and you can send them to these people to get real heightened methodology and a treatment plan, and not something that is a bandage approach that's just bandaging the whole problem and covering it up. We need to address these issues because you're hearing about more and more people who have had loss of their children being shot up in the street.